What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. Today, we're talking about this.
We've got one, I believe, major potential whistleblower that might be coming forward, at least to meet with me and Anna and Tim in the coming month, really. And so that's something that Grusch has been working on. I don't want to say, obviously, for obvious reasons, who that is.
Unfortunately, now deceased Vice President Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself. Not shocking that he was involved in this. And essentially, when he left in 2009, that was the last time that these activities really had central leadership. Without being inappropriate, I will say that General Clapper was well aware of the crash retrieval issue, managed the crash retrieval issue, and when he was the DNI, USDI, and DIA director, he placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, both publicly and I'll just say non-publicly as well.
All right, Vetters, please hit that like button. That really helps out the videos. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button, y'all. All right, Vetters, so I'm still a little sick, so pardon the voice, but we're going to power through this. Now, what's today's video about? Well, it's about James Clapper and some comments that David Grusch recently made on an interview he did with Megyn Kelly. But there's a lot more to this. Sometimes you got to wait till the dust settles because everyone's been talking about this viral clip, but I uncovered a lot more things and we got a lot to break down in this video. So let's jump to this first clip of David Grusch on Megyn Kelly talking about James Clapper.
And I did want to point out General Clapper, the former DNI in the documentary. I certainly applaud him for at least speaking out in general. He goes on, I believe, I've only seen clips of Age of Disclosure, not the whole thing, where there was a program when he was the director of national intelligence where they were tracking these vehicles over Area 51, of course, the famed classified test location. And I'm a little bit disappointed as a fellow Air Force officer, and certainly General Clapper rose to the ranks as 3-star general. That's all he said in the documentary, that was a program he was aware of. In fact, without being inappropriate, I will say that General Clapper was well aware of the crash retrieval issue, managed the crash retrieval issue, and when he was the DNI, USDI, and DIA director, he placed people in critical roles to manage this issue, both publicly and I'll just say non-publicly as well. And I'll allow the audience distill what I'm saying at the risk of being inappropriate or going too far with my discussion. So General Clapper, Stephanie O'Sullivan, other folks in the IC that are well aware of this issue, that were in rooms discussing this issue, I ask you to be greater leaders on this. I should not be the only former military officer and intelligence official that is being completely candid with the information that they were exposed to. So perhaps
once again, James Clapper understates what he knows and what he's done, not wittingly.
Now, there's an interesting part in there where David Grusch claims like, oh, I haven't seen the Age of Disclosure documentary. I've only seen some clips. Just pin that because we're going to come back to that. But let's continue with this, allegation that David Grusch is throwing out here, right, about James Clapper, right? And this is big, right? Because in the Age of Disclosure documentary, he basically states that, James Clapper only mentioned that there was a program over at Area 51, this and that. And David Grusch is simply implying that, well, wait a second, James Clapper, you know a lot more than what you said in the documentary, right? So here's Dan Farah on Joe Rogan explaining that a little bit more.
Jim Clapper, the guy's never talked about this topic in his life. He's in his 80s. He was the head of Air Force Intelligence. He was the director of national intelligence. Never publicly spoken about UAP. He comes out and does the interview, and he told me, he told me that he was doing it because it was important to do and that the people needed to know. And he drops the bomb in the film that UAP activity over Area 51 is real. It's in fact real. And he goes on the record saying that the Air Force has had a program to investigate this stuff, whereas the Air Force is saying they haven't had a program since Project Blue Book. So I think the people that I interviewed really felt like a weight on their shoulders to get this off their chest. And to give you more context on Clapper, the poor guy's wife was in the hospital dying. He left the hospital to come do the interview. And I actually said to him, I was like, are you sure you want to do this today? And he's like, no, I want to do it. It's important.
Wow.
So, like, I think I really felt it. These people all felt like the public needed to know the base facts that they could lawfully disclose. And
look, it's not the first time that James Clapper has talked about UAP himself. He did a CNN interview not too long ago. Well, it's been years actually now, where he kind of admitted some regret about how he handled, UFOs.
So next month, a government report is expected to be made public on the sightings of UFOs. As the former director of national intelligence, I think there have been a lot of theories about UFOs. What do you make of these revelations? What might this be? Have you seen any yourself? What do you make of this?
Well, first, I think it is kind of, there is logic to the intelligence community addressing this, since the intelligence community has a lot of practice of dealing with ambiguity and less than complete facts. And secondly, I think it's really important that whenever we witness such phenomenon, that it is recorded and documented for the future. When we may gather more information and have a better understanding of what's transpiring. Could there be life out there? Sure. As huge as the universe is, we really can't reject that possibility. So I think this is a good thing. The transparency, I expect this report will be filled with ambiguity as well. And people, depending on their leanings, will extract what they want out of this report.
How it always goes, right? Where there is ambiguity, people can pull what they want from it. But it does sound like it is, something that we haven't seen before, this type of transparency around this topic.
Yes, and I'm not sure why that is. The only reason to me, for classification would be if there's some sensitive method that data relating to so-called UFOs was collected. But other than that, I don't know why we haven't been more transparent about it in the past, and I'm part of that crime, I guess. And my former capacities were, I didn't insist on more transparency with respect to this issue.
And to be fair, David Grusch isn't the only one that's brought up UFOs and James Clapper in the UFO world, right? Our favorite Lou Elizondo has also brought him up. Here's a clip from that UFO podcast years ago where he brought up James Clapper as well.
Furthermore, what I'll share, which I haven't shared publicly, is that the former USDI, before he became the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, his name was Jim Clapper, General Clapper. He was also the director of several organizations before. A very good man. Politics aside, I don't take sides politically. I don't care if you're liberal or conservative or anything in between. The bottom line, he was a very, very good intelligence officer and a very good leader when he was in. And what I will say is that he was. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but he expressed to me, if at some point you ever get a chance to talk to him, he, in front of my wife, he said, "Look, I'm really glad, Lou, you were doing this. I'm really glad we had a UFO program. It's something that we should have done."
And even Ross Coulthart and Bryce Zabel on the Need to Know podcast years ago as well talked about James Clapper.
I think, mate, the glaring omission in the hearing from the 17th of May, the first congressional hearing, was that neither Ron Moultrie, the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, nor Scott Bray, the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, talked about the possibility, even the possibility, of extraterrestriality. In fact,
although, Ross, I should say the reason they probably didn't talk about that is they couldn't pronounce it any more than I could. And I don't even know if you go to the dictionary if it's a word. But I will say this: they should have paid heed to some of their bosses and the folks they take they take lunches with in the intelligence business, because not only did Avril Haines suggest that we had to keep open that possibility, but former CIA directors Clapper and Brennan have both in the past year basically made statements that leave it quite clear that they're thinking about the very same thing. So it was extremely odd to have people at the very top saying, oh yeah, we better keep our minds open to a really mind-blowing conclusion. Well, at the same time, they send these two, I don't want to call them lackeys, because lackeys usually implies that they're lower level. These guys were not lower level, but they were clearly not there to have a meeting of the minds and share a lot of truth. They were not there for that.
And it doesn't stop there. Here's former NSA Director Mike Rogers, who served from 2014 to 2018, also talking about an unusual request he got from James Clapper.
There's kind of shifted in the consciousness in recent years, and that's UAPs, UFOs.
There you go.
The question they want, and one question in particular stands out to me, where they said, well, look, whether these UAPs that have been on Navy film and so on are explained by just a huge advance in technology from a rival nation, or something that the United States is developing, or something that is simply inexplicable. What is your perspective on that? Because we know that Congress has taken interest, certain members of Congress have spoken about this, and clearly a lot of people online, they see the videos, they see the stories.
This is a good conspiracy theory topic. It seems to energize a lot of people.
So what are your views on that? And what do you make of people's interest in that as a subject?
So first of all, I can still remember, this is probably back in 2016, 2015, when the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, calls me, Mike, I need you to go through all of it. I need the team to go through all of NSA's holding all of its files, and I need everything that you have on UFOs. And I'm like, what, sir? You want me to do a review of our databases on UFOs? And I'm literally thinking to myself, is this some kind of joke? But clearly it's not, which is reflected in the question. For a lot of people, this is, hey, what is going on out there? Look, clearly there are phenomena occurring out there that both are visible and that we can't explain. I don't know what causes them. I don't know what they are. I don't know why. I never saw anything in my experience in the government in 37 years, both as an intelligence professional, but also as a senior military individual. I never saw anything that led me to believe that there was some external, i.e. non-terrestrial actor behind this kind of activity. But the flip side is I couldn't explain yet some of the activity. I just don't know.
But then you have to wonder, is James Clapper even trustworthy? Like, even what he's saying about UFOs, can we even trust anything he's saying? Right? Take a look at this tweet from Tulsi Gabbard. Newly declassified top secret emails sent on December 22nd, 2016, complying with President Obama's order to create the manufactured January 2017 ICA about Russia, expose how DNI James Clapper demanded the IC fall in line behind the Russia hoax. Clapper admits that it was a, quote, team sport that required, quote, compromise on our, quote, normal modalities. Read for yourself below. And then she includes the documents there. So can James Clapper even be trusted, right? Even if he says stuff about UFOs, can we even trust what he's saying, right? Because he clearly would bend at will to just sort of cover up national security. And then people might say, well, yeah, he's doing that to cover up UFOs. But I just don't even think he would bring it up, right? But then why is David Grusch saying this? And where does he even get that information from, right? David Grusch. And remember that clip I showed you about Mike Rogers, the former NSA director, right? Talking about the files that was requested from James Clapper. Well, apparently James Clapper tried to get Mike Rogers fired, right? So is Mike Rogers just kind of trying to make him look like a goofball here, right? Take a look at this Washington Post clip here. Defense Secretary Ash Carter and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper have asked President Obama to fire Admiral Michael Rogers, the director of the National Security Agency, the Washington Post reported Saturday. So this was a few years ago. So I don't know. This is so interesting. And it doesn't stop there. Here's a tweet from Matt Taibbi. We found what wasn't really there, quote. James Clapper was in charge of image analysis before the Iraq War and boasted his images, quote, carried the day for Colin Powell in his speech to the UN. He copped to finding things that, quote, weren't really there. So could he be just making this stuff up about UFOs as well? Right? I don't know. How trustworthy is James Clapper? All of a sudden we're supposed to believe him now when he starts talking about UFOs? I got to admit, there's some red flags here. But of course, everyone's like, James Clapper said, oh my God, it's happening. It's happening. Disclosure's coming, James Clapper. But wait a second. Maybe he's just a complete liar, right? Again, I want to know where David Grusch is getting this stuff about what he knew about this and he knew about that and he was in charge of this and he was in charge of that, right? I mean, does David Grusch really know what he's talking about? I like David Grusch, but maybe he's also a little misinformed. Remember when David Grusch said in that clip that I showed you that, you know, he'd only seen clips of the Age of Disclosure, not the full thing.
I've only seen clips of Age of Disclosure, not the whole thing.
You must be thinking, well, that's so unusual. Why hasn't he seen the whole movie? First of all, why is he not in the movie, right? Well, I covered this a while back when I did my review of Age of Disclosure, but let's refresh our memory, okay? Here's a clip of George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell talking about it.
Dave would have been a valuable addition to the movie. Why do you suppose he wasn't in it?
Well, I think he definitely chose not to be in it. I remember helping to make that connection with Dan so that they could have that conversation. You know, I think Dave has a kind of different tactic to getting out what he knows to be true. Dave is a true whistleblower. This is not a managed message with Dave. Not that it is with the other guys, but it is at least authorized. With Dave, you know, he really is working on a fundamental attitude that nobody has the right to hold this back. So let's go to his interview for 1 second. I helped in just trying to get, him in touch with a network and a producer that would be able to hear what he had to say and treat it properly. I mean, we could have done the same, George, but, you know, President Trump doesn't watch Weaponized as far as I know. So, so David Grusch talked again, and I was really glad he decided to, because he's not all over the media. I do think that he has a difference of opinion, and that's for him to talk about when it comes to this stuff. You know, he really thinks everybody should just open up and say what they know. For example, he thinks that if Lou Elizondo was part of the Legacy UFO program, that he should just say it. Go out on the limb and just say it. And so I think that's the difference of opinion. I think the film would have had Dave participate if Dave had agreed, but I think that he's just on a different path. Am I explaining that clearly?
Yeah.
Kind of. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I always thought that was weird that David Grusch wasn't in Age of Disclosure, and then now you find out he hasn't even seen the movie, right? Because he's just thinking differently. So I don't know. Again, you got all these narratives behind the scene of people differently, this, that, right? And essentially he believes, like, why aren't these people coming out and saying something more? They know more. Come out and say it. But even David Grusch holds back. So I don't know, that's so unusual, right? Because you even have Lou Elizondo, you know, said this on a podcast a while back, which nobody talks about. It was called the World of Big Ideas podcast. And he said this about working with David Grusch.
And I had it easy. A lot of people say, oh, it was horrible what you went through. And yeah, you know what? It wasn't fun. But there's a lot of people like Dave Grusch who had to go through a lot worse than I did as far as repercussions. Within 24 hours, they tried to bury his career. And, love him or hate him, irrelevant. He is a patriot. And I worked with him at U.S. Space Force. I wasn't allowed to say where, but at this point, I don't care anymore because people are like, oh, well, he didn't really. Yes, he did. We worked in his SAP-F facility, a skiff together, and our only job was UAP. And no one knows that. And I'll tell you right here and right now, for the first time, that's exactly what we were working on, and Space Force was paying us to do it. And this was after ATIP. So when people are saying, oh, well, there wasn't anything to see here, that's not true. And in fact, some of the most compelling data that we have right now in the U.S. government was a result of our time at Space Force, not at ATIP, because we had better technology, more capabilities, more persistence. I'm hopeful that story will be told sometime because people like Dave, I hate talking about myself. I do suffer a little bit from imposter syndrome because I know a lot of people had a lot worse than me. So I don't want to be the poster child of, victimization. I don't look at victimization as a virtue. I look at it as a challenge that we all have to overcome as human beings, part of the human experience, right?
And of course, that information has never come out. But David Grusch has never mentioned that as well. So is Lou Elizondo lying or, right? And if David Grusch is like, hey, come out and say what you know. Well, David Grusch isn't saying it either, unless Lou Elizondo's lying about having worked with David Grusch's Space Force. again, a spider web of convoluted comments, and right, it's like, what are we supposed to do with all this, right? It's like when you try to start connecting the dots, nothing connects. You know, this is all meant to be, you just watch this from a surface level point, but when you have to deal with it like I do, you start to see that these things don't make sense, and then you have to ask yourself, do I just ignore that? Do I not tell people that these things don't make sense? Do I not point out these red flags? I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't just ignore what's right in front of me, right? So I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Let's move on.
Unfortunately, now deceased Vice President Dick Cheney, Darth Vader himself, not shocking that he was involved in this. And essentially when he left in 2009, that was the last time that these activities really had central leadership.
And then you got David Grusch just outing Dick Cheney. And this is not the first time this has been told. Journalist Walter Kern also talked about this a while ago when he interviewed David Grusch. And apparently David Grusch told him this, right? Dick Cheney's was at the head. And since Dick Cheney left in 2009, no one's been at the head of this UFO legacy program. So since 2009, it's been running around like the headless horseman, right? Which is interesting. I don't know, right? Like, where's that? And Dick Cheney's, of course, passed away. And guess who worked with Dick Cheney? You know, James Clapper as well, right? So I don't know, right? This is all so confusing. Was Dick Cheney at the top and James Clapper was running it too? I mean, I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments.
You know, if Marco Rubio called you tomorrow and said, what should we do about this? What would you say?
Yeah, he certainly gave a deflated response on Hannity recently, saying he has no ability to investigate. Certainly as the National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, and the Chief Archivist of the United States, which that last position is actually very important because under National Archives, they manage the public interest, the classification board. And between that and the Presidential Intelligence Advisory Board, currently chaired by Mr. Devin Nunes, and his connection to the cabinet officials, certainly Secretary Rubio or National Security Advisor Rubio should authorize a legal and lawful investigation using resources in the Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service, because there's been a lot of procurement fraud, a lot of misappropriation of funds, also white collar and blue collar crime, to include harming officials. So certainly.
Wait, but where would he start? Whose tires would he kick first?
That's a question, or she's an answer I would provide in person in a prescriptive manner behind the scenes. Certainly, there are elements within the Central Intelligence Agency Director of Science and Technology. I would start there. There are certain career officials that are still there that manage the issue. There are certain officials that are long-timers in the Office of the Director of National Intelligence that have been there for a very, very long time. That's also helped manage this issue for a while. So I certainly have the Rolodex of names, offices, and I certainly have bumped into the halls and walls, facilities where everything is. So I think it's Secretary Rubio liaising with the Vice President and President Trump, getting the boss's strategic vision on this, how they would like to proceed publicly but privately, and start going after some of those agencies. And the Department of the Air Force, particular offices and organizations within there that are very near and dear to my heart, were also involved. So I have to be a little evasive and vague publicly. I don't like to tip off.
You're already doing so much to tell us what we need to know. I appreciate it. I know there's certain lines you can't cross or you get in trouble.
And what David Grusch doesn't mention there is that also in that same Fox interview that he's alluding to, Marco Rubio said that his section in the Age of Disclosure was selectively edited, right? And that he was just a senator at that time, not Secretary of State. And he hasn't been able to verify any of those claims, right? And he wasn't really talking about UFOs, right? He was talking about strategic surprise in a different way. If you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert.
But I've got to ask you, there's a show that's come out. It's called The Age of Disclosure. Yeah. Okay, I know everyone probably, right? Everyone asks you about it? Sure. It's a new documentary. We had repeated instances of something operating in the airspace over restricted nuclear facilities. It's not ours, and presidents operate on a need-to-know basis.
Yeah.
Okay, that is...
So a couple points on it. First of all, I'm not disavowing that. It was an interview that was done almost maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in the Senate.
Right.
So it wasn't recent. The second point I would make, I was describing the allegations that people have come forward with. I have people that came forward to us. You know, some of these people were Navy pilots, admirals, generals, whatever, that would come forward and say, that there were programs in the U.S. government that not even presidents were made aware of. So I was describing what people had said to me, not things that I have firsthand knowledge of in that regard. A little bit of selective editing, but it's okay because, you know, you're trying to sell a show there.
But, right, there's a lot of things we should be doing, or this should happen, or this should, but nothing happens, right? This will be the year, right? We're just spinning our wheels here, right? And if the Secretary of State is not actively interested in this, maybe there's nothing to it, right? Because why wouldn't he look into this? I mean, look at what we're starting around the world right now, right? We just took Maduro from Venezuela, not to get political, okay? Just stating facts, right? We're looking at other countries, we're getting involved, there's foreign relations happening, right? Clearly there's stuff with China, Russia, right? Why wouldn't we use this stuff? Secretary of State, he'd be all over this. Right? Something's just not adding up, right? And this whole disclosure that was going to come from Trump because of the age of disclosure, nothing has happened, right? Trump hasn't even seen the movie. Secretary of State saying they selectively edited that. And then nobody seems to mention that, right? And again, I made a whole video about how they propped up Marco Rubio as being the guy. And then he comes out and just sweeps the legs out, you know? Put him in a body bag, Johnny.
So you okay? Can you go on? Get him a body bag! Yeah!
Shout out Karate Kid. Anyway, let's move on.
Early on the global war on terror, a lot of the money that was initially given to these companies was essentially reallocated for overseas contingency operations. And these contractors essentially started to do their own thing, if you will, something called IRAD, Internal Research and Development. And privately, they continued certain things that actually the government was trying to cancel as it relates to the subject. And they went off and retrieved and exploited things essentially on their own and only loosely accountable back to their government handlers. And it's funny you mentioned the CIA. Naturally, there's a lot of good men and women that work there. My wife actually was a CIA officer, and she also served in the Air Force with me. But Chairwoman Luna and the task force and the committee staff, certainly I assisted in my other professional capacity, helping Representative Burleson's office, did send legal interrogatives to several agencies and private companies. CIA was one of them. And curiously enough, CIA provided what I considered an extremely disrespectful response. They declined to answer our interrogatives on this matter, which is their participation in crash retrieval operations, and just referred us to the Pentagon's Aero Office, which has a nebulous and concerning history in itself. And I just find it very interesting that CIA did that. Now, I'm not saying John Ratcliffe or Michael Ellis, who's the acting general counsel and deputy director, had a hand in that response, but they certainly are the leaders of their organization. John Ratcliffe has spoke positively on this issue previously, and I would hope that John Ratcliffe was placed there by DNI Gabbard and the president to enact some reforms on the CIA. And unfortunately, the CIA has a lot of skeletons in its closets. Other things I know about that I can't talk about that are conventional national security issues. But the crash retrieval issue, unfortunately, is certainly one of them. And they've done a lot of concerning things.
What's being alleged by you and many others is that they have literal skeletons in their closet or whatever.
They do.
Whatever's inside an alien being.
So the CIA has some skeletons in their closet. Yeah, they do. MK Ultra, among other things, right? So that's no mystery to me at all. And could there be something there? I don't know. That gets talked about a lot with the CIA. But again, at the end of the day, no proof, no evidence, just a lot of chatter. Let's move on.
Ask you a little bit about the work that you've been doing with David Grusch, because as far as I the last time I checked, you were talking to Stephen Diener, who's a friend of, he's a colleague of mine, and you told him that Grusch probably was going to stay until next year as well. Do you guys have any like planned schedule or any type of strategy to move forward over the next 6 months or so?
Yeah, Grusch has been a tremendous asset to my team. And I want to make it very clear and clarify that Grusch works for my office. He does not work for the committee itself. That's the only way that we were able to pull this off. But he works for my office, and he's been providing tremendous guidance and insights as an advisor in this topic. Grusch helped us write the interrogatives, the letters that we sent to the CIA, that we sent to the Aerospace Corporation, and the Navy as well. And Grusch is going to continue to help in that regard. I think we have got some more letters that we're putting together. We've already had a briefing from the Aerospace Corporation in a secure setting. What I can say is that it really didn't turn up anything whatsoever. But at least we got a response, and they took the time to fly to DC to meet with us in person. So that was kind of a good indicator that these companies do take these letters seriously, and hopefully we can continue in that and try to get down to at least get some answers.
Okay, so Grusch has been working with Eric Burleson, right, behind the scenes, trying to get some stuff going. They couldn't do anything with the NDAA, this UAP amendment that they've been talking about for years, right? That fell through. And Burleson kind of explains in that clip on Psychoactivo, which I'll put a link down below. You can go check out the rest of that. But essentially, it's just such small movement, right? Because Grusch had come out with this big investigation. It's just like nothing has happened, right? And then there's always like something around the corner, right? We've got this big whistleblower getting ready to come out, right? As Eric Burleson states here.
In addition, Grusch has brought a lot of witnesses to me, some that are not willing to go forward. I've had multiple meetings with some very interesting individuals that have given me a lot of insight. And that would have only been available because Grusch had contacts to those people, and they felt comfortable and trusting, Grusch. And so, and then we've got one, I believe, major potential whistleblower that might be coming forward, at least to meet with me and Anna and Tim in the coming month, really. And so that's something that Grusch has been working on. I don't want to say, obviously, for obvious reasons, who that is.
So again, maybe this brand new whistleblower is going to come forward. Everyone's going to fall head over heels for, and I'm sure I'll cover on this channel, right? But it just doesn't move the needle. Are we ever going to get really a true whistleblower, right, who doesn't go through these channels like this? I don't know. Maybe this just is a long journey, to make this happen. I don't know. Government disclosure just seems so dead to me. And look, just to be fair to the whole thing, a brand new report has just come out from John Greenwald of the Black Vault, okay? And people are probably going to be pretty upset by this, but, got to be transparent and fair here, all right? So essentially this report came out against Grusch that doesn't look too good. Let me explain. This is a tweet from Stephen Greenstreet. I know, journalist for the New York Post. I used the term journalist loosely, but he's basically just taking all of John Greenwald's work here and, regurgitating it, which is fine. So shout out to John Greenwald, really, for doing all the legwork here. But take a look at this. The DoD IG did a years-long, extensive investigation into all of this and released their final report in February of 2025. That report was just publicly released via FOIA to the Black Vault. Here is the report. The report completely demolishes Grusch's claims. Turns out, Grusch being stripped of his top secret clearances had nothing to do with UFOs. In fact, internal communications show officials were confused that Grusch was claiming whistleblower reprisals because of UFOs, because Grusch didn't even actually provide any evidence of anything. One official wrote, "On what grounds does Grusch have for a whistleblower case. He didn't blow any whistle or bring to light any info. Another internal communication in the report shows officials describing the Grusch situation as, quote, goofy. The ultimate truth is that Grusch was actually stripped of his security clearances because he had a history of, quote, behavior issues, was, quote, untrustworthy, and had broken many rules unrelated to UFOs. The Department of Defense Consolidated Adjudications Facility, which is the central authority that determines eligibility for security clearances, stated it was, quote, clearly inconsistent with the national interest to continue Grusch's access to classified information. The CAF told Grusch in writing, quote, a whole person assessment of your behavior as identified under these concerns reflects questionable judgment, lack of candor, dishonesty, or unwillingness to comply with rules and regulations, raising questions about your reliability, trustworthiness, and ability to protect classified or sensitive information. In essence, they considered Grusch to be a loose cannon and a threat to national security. At one point, they collected, quote, all of his access badges and walked him out of the building. They later reassigned him to work that didn't require top secret clearances. So again, I just had to include that. I'm going to put a link down below to the report. Think of it what you want. It's important to share all the facts and you can make up your own mind, right? Does this completely, debunk Grusch as a whistleblower? I don't know. Is it important to consider this complaint, this report from the DOD? Yeah, it is, right? I think it's important to take in all the facts. It would be interesting to hear Grusch's response to this, right? Which we may never get because he hardly does interviews. And it would also be interesting to hear Burleson's response to this as well. Now, does this negate everything that Grusch has been stating as far as, what he knows, Dick Cheney, James Clapper, this, that, the other? I mean, if it's true, yeah, it does. But look, in this same interview with Megyn Kelly, Representative Anna Paulina Luna also was interviewed.
Representative Luna is also fighting for stronger protections for whistleblowers like David Grusch, our first guest. She's a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and she has said that she personally had an encounter herself with an object she believes was likely a UAP. She joins me now for the first time. Representative, great to have you.
Nice to have you, Megan.
First of all, I didn't know she had an encounter herself, so that's interesting. I may have heard that, but I don't recall that. She may have talked about that on Joe Rogan, but honestly, I can't remember. But either way, that's interesting.
The pushback that we've received has been so incredibly obvious at this point that it just kind of furthers our own opinions on there are people that are controlling this information, and there does seem to be, even outside of the purview of, I think, sometimes our own secretaries who have the best intentions on declassifying this stuff, there is this internal intelligence battle on this topic. And so, you're talking earlier about whistleblower protections. One of the things that we're going to have to do, because what I did not want to do is host just another hearing with more witness testimony without providing the documents and evidence. I think that would probably be a waste of resources unless we can provide that directly to the American people. And we have received a list, I think it's over about 40 different documents to actually be able to get that information, to provide it, but also to bring forward legislation out of oversight, and actually just left a hearing earlier talking to the chairman about it, to actually bring forward immunity for all of the people, some of them in the film, some personally that we know of, to come talk with us in a skiff about locations or specifically more information pertaining to this without, being in fear of basically being hit with.
So clearly she's stating there's a cover up, we're being stopped, we're being, and that seems to be the gist essentially, is that anytime there's pushback or this, they immediately think, well, they wouldn't be pushing back unless it was true. But that's not necessarily the case, right? They could be pushing back for other reasons, right? That can't be our best evidence that this is really happening. Well, why would they push back? Why would they hide this? Why would they hide that? That may give you reason to continue to look, but not reason enough to be like, that's the proof, that's the smoking gun, this is real, that there's this cover up, right? I gotta be honest. Little by little, I'm starting to think that there is no real government cover up of UFOs or reverse engineered technology or anything like that. I do think that there is a phenomenon that exists, but I'm not so sure our government has UFOs, or at least not the number that they say, or the crashes or the buy or all this stuff. probably 99% of the information is bullshit and is trying to find what's that one sliver of truth in all of this. I have no idea, y'all. Help me find this needle in the haystack, because the haystack just keeps getting bigger. All right, y'all. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and put source links down below to everything that I brought up today. Check it out. There's more to the Grusch interviews. So again, link down below. Go check that out. He says a lot more things if you want to go see that. We'll see you guys in the next one. Remember, Vedas, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.
Hey, it's 6:36 in Paducah, Kentucky, and at about 6:05, I seen a strand of looked like stars flying in a straight line, probably 15 to 18 of them, and they were above my house. They was all flying in a straight line, and they would disappear one at a time, and they was in a straight line. It's something like I've never seen nothing like that around here before. Today is Tuesday the 6th, and this happened at around 6:30. It's 6:30 now, so it's been about 6:15. I immediately called you, not trying to get put on the air, but I would like for you to check into it. It's lights over Paducah, Kentucky. I don't really know who to call or who to find out what to do, or not what to do, but who to ask. I don't even know who to ask. What was that? Very strange. If you would, I don't know, look into it. If there's something to it, report on it, please. Thank you.